Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Civil Service Live, and welcome to our session today on the way ahead, different methods of public service delivery. My name is Kevin Sorkin. I am publisher of Civil Service World and managing director of Civil Service Live. The first thing I would like to do is to run through our panel for today. We have Joan Wood, Director, Online Services and Digital Development at HMRC. We have Wilma Smythe, Head of Customer Intelligence at the Identity Passport Service. We have David Rennie, Digital Delivery Team. And we have Paula Venables, Managing Director of Post Office. So I'm going to ask our panel, starting with Wilma, to take us through the opening remarks and their overview of different methods of public service delivery.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I'm Wilma Smythe, Head of Customer Intelligence at the Identity and Passport Service, or IPS. We deliver passports and civil registration products and services, such as birth and marriage certificates. And in addition to our regular methods of applying for passports, we also have an online application form, which is, currently fairly basic, but we're also improving it and looking at delivering a new solution to be launched in the next few months. So currently, the application form, customers can submit information online. They can we send them the application again, print it, and send it back to them so that they can sign it with a wet signature, which is required from our perspective, from the passport side of things in terms of identity assurance. Then they post it back to us along with photos and documents. The new solution is much more improved. We allow customers to pay online. They can also print a declaration form, which they then sign, because again it's required, and then they send it back to us. But the main improvement of the new solution is that the questions are now personalized to the needs of the customer, and that means that it's more efficient from their perspective, and also that from our perspective we would expect less errors. Now, what can we say about channel shift from the Identity and Passport Service? The key message for us is that just the fact that you think about launching a new solution is not enough. So we have not just anticipated how a solution should look like. We have actually developed a very customer-focused approach to designing new solutions. And we've done that through a very extensive program of work of customer insights. So we recognize that online is not the only solution for everyone. We, in fact, are doing a lot of work to understand the ideal channel mix for IPS. Essentially, what we have done is really focusing on making sure that we think about developing a solution that meets the customer needs, and also that two areas. One is around how we can influence behavior for channel shift, and the other area about how we can make sure that customers use our solution. Now, I'll talk about some of the specifics of these two areas. So, for example, the first area is around understanding how customers make channel choices. We are very interested in ensuring that we can influence behavior by understanding how customers use different channels. So we know who our customers are, who our customer segments are, and which segments are likely to go online. We also understand fairly clearly the customer journey. We're doing a lot of work to understand how people use how people apply through our different methods, not just online, but all the other methods, including the post office, etc. And one of the things we've learned is that channel preference does not just drive channel choice. We actually have learned that it's more about the context in which customers are in. Or even how they remember their last transaction. So when it comes to influencing behavior, we really need to understand that customer journey, and when specifically in that journey we can start thinking about interventions for channel shift. The other area is around user-centered design, which ensures that customers stay once they arrive to your solution. So we've done a lot of web usability studies to ensure that the customer is at the heart of product design. So we've adjusted the original solution we've adjusted the process flow to make sure that it met customer needs, and it was much easier to use. And we've also done a lot of work around web analytics, so understanding how people arrive to our online form from DirectGov or others, and how they actually, the dropout rates. So how we can ensure that if there are specific issues in specific pages, we can improve them, not just for this solution, but the new solution to be launched in the next few months. So essentially, from the identity and passport perspective, we apply a very customer-focused approach to channel shift, not just about influencing behavior, but also around making sure that once customers arrive to your site, they stay and they can complete the transaction as we're asking them to do.
Thank you very much. I'll pass on to David now, please.
Well, my name is David Rennie. I work at Cabinet Office on something that we call the Identity Assurance Programme. I won't give you a full resume, but my background is from originally at Identity and Passport Service, working on the identity card, and then moved through Treasury onto DirectGov, looking at the identity assurance problem that DirectGov has. And then that's morphed into Government Digital Services, and now we're as part of Cabinet Office. And along the way, I've picked up thousands of these cards, I've worked in Richmond House and the Adelphi and Hercules House and now 22 Whitehall and One Horse Guards. And I've got a little bag full of these things. The only building I can't get into at the moment is the building that I work in. They've taken my pass away from me, although they know me at the door and they give me a pass when I get to the door. But it's very frustrating not being able to get into my own office. And it really sort of is a bit ironic, given that I'm working on identity assurance, and it summarises the nature of the problem that we have for public services in terms of identity assurance. So we have one brand, or we have a few brands, of course, in terms of DirectGov and BusinessLink and NHS Choices and such like. But particularly from a DirectGov perspective, which is where I've spent a lot of time working, the customer could come to DirectGov on different days and come to a different public service from a different department and be asked to prove identity separately for each of those services. And that could be a very confusing experience for the customer. If they think they went to that website yesterday and they logged in, and today they've got to log in in a different way, that's not a very good customer experience. And it's a problem. It's not just a DirectGov problem. It's a problem across all elements of digital transactions. And it really is the problem of trust. At heart, identity assurance, it's become quite an emotive subject in the UK, the word identity. But really what we're talking about is trust. How do you know that the service that you're interacting with is actually from the organisation that it says it is? And how does that organisation know who you are? And unless we can solve this problem of trust, we end up coming to a big point of no return, if you like, around digital services, because at the moment the tendency is to put the burden on the customer, is to keep on increasing the length of the password, increasing the number of usernames and shared secrets and other devices. And then we tell the customer off if they haven't updated their antivirus software on their devices. And if it all goes wrong, the customer is left having to sort out the problem. And that isn't the way to increase the take-up of digital services. It's not a customer-centric way, as Wilma was describing. So what we're trying to look at is a cross-government approach that works around the needs of the customer to address this problem, because otherwise people just won't be able to use digital services. So that's our challenge. And in terms of the way we're trying to address the challenge, as I'm sure everybody is aware, the world does not work purely online. We don't work. It's not a case of people who don't use the internet today are going to use the internet tomorrow. People will interact with public services in the way that people want to. And that might be through online for some people, but for others it'll be what we call assisted digital. They will need to get help in doing that. And for some people they might want to go to a physical outlet. But then from a public service perspective, that interaction should be no different. So we receive the same information in the same way at the back end. So we don't mean, when we talk about digital services, often people immediately jump to thinking online services. But we should think of digital services in the way that we think of digital money through a credit card. I go into a shop and I can use a credit card, and that's effectively a digital transaction, because at the point in time when I'm going to walk out of the shop with my television or whatever it is I'm buying, the bank is asked if I'm actually good for the cash. And if I'm not good for the cash, then there's an embarrassing scene with the cashier. But I don't walk out with the television. And so digital transactions don't necessarily mean that the whole customer experience is online. It means we have to think across the different channels. So it's an interesting challenge from a public sector point of view, because you could describe public services as either being an obligation or an entitlement. Either we're obliged to pay our taxes, and it's something if we don't do it, then we'll find ourselves fined, or we're entitled to healthcare or benefits or some other form of education, some other form of public service. So the logic of trying to understand how the customer works and work with the customer to deliver the service is not something that's been at the forefront of public service delivery traditionally. But it is now with digital services, because what we're trying to do is encourage the customer to use digital means to interact with public services. And that means trying to encourage the customer to use to work in a different way. And for some customers that's very difficult, because they won't have come across digital transactions before. For others it'll be very natural. And what we have to do is we have to explain how digital transactions can be very convenient and very easy, and we have to ensure that we have the trust layer in there so that people trust these services. So we have a number of challenges to overcome, and I've only got 5 minutes, so I won't go into precisely how we're approaching that, but I think there's a very consistent theme across the piece that we will have different aspects of trying to achieve that.
Thank you, David, and I'm pleased you didn't need your pass to get into Civil Service Live today. That's our benefit, I think. Paula, can I pass on to you?
Yes. Good morning. Paula Venables, Managing Director of the Post Office. I wanted to start by showing you this. I don't know if you can read it at the back, but it says, £1 million fraud of the man with 131 names. And it just seemed to, this is a headline in the Daily Mail today, and to me it just seemed to sum up really an awful lot of what we're all trying to do here, which is around, as David says, identity issuance and assurance, the trust around it, and how as all of us working within the public sector, both in national and in local government, we manage this shift in terms of digital channels and how digital can help so much in reducing fraud and cost. But before I sort of come on to that, what I thought I would do is just, perhaps in my 5 minutes, talk about three things. One is why the Post Office, why we're here on this platform today. Secondly, about that delivery and how I think we can help in everything you've heard so far. And then really thirdly, how the Post Office takes this forward in the future. So first of all, if you think about the Post Office, there are 60 within where we are sitting today, all of them at the moment dealing with customers, staff in most cases who know those customers day in, day out. All of those 60 post offices and the other 11,800 of them across the country are online, completely and utterly digitally online, including the vans that drive around the west coast of Scotland, including the community post offices that you'll find down in the southwest of Cornwall. Every single post office, 35,000 counters, are now online. And what that means is that we are already in the 21st century in terms of digital delivery of services. And sometimes that's quite a shock when you think about the traditional local post office. Not many people who come in actually realise just the amount of investment that's gone into the post office over the last few years to give us that capability. In terms of our technology and how we play in this space, it's not just the fact that all of our counters are online and therefore we can handle things digitally. We've also now got in 750 post offices and plans to roll out further 2,000, what we've called AEI kit. Now this stands for Application Enrolment and Identity, and this is precisely the space that David is talking about and Wilma. It's around physical identity, assurance and issuance. What these machines do, and they are world leading and they're not available anywhere else yet, is they take biometric photo capture. Now the importance of that is, this chap with 131 names, the reason he managed to get them is because nobody knew who he actually was. If you have your photograph taken biometrically, it's the structure of your face that is captured with very, very small dots, essentially. That doesn't alter. You can disguise yourself however you like, but that structure doesn't alter, just as your fingerprints don't, electronic signatures do a little bit. But this equipment that we now have in these post offices does that. And since November last year, we've done 500,000 digital identity captures for the DVLA, for the 10-year license renewal, and also for the issuance of the plastic car driving licenses. And we've done 100,000 in a pilot we're doing for the UK Borders Authority. And it has proved hugely successful, and it just hasn't been a problem. And the reason it hasn't been any kind of problem is because the staff in the post office joined this business, many of them a couple of decades ago, maybe 3, to give customer service. And it's what they do, it's they help customers. So when customers come in for these services, the staff are fully trained, they're fully qualified to use the equipment, and it takes between 7 and 10 minutes to do it, which is just extraordinary. And what happens now, in the case of the DVLA, is they're a step ahead of what Wilma was talking about in IPS, is they have everything captured digitally. There is no paperwork involved whatsoever. So you come in with an application for a driving license or a renewal with a piece of paper with a barcode on it. That's the only paper involved. That barcode has your digital data, which has been given to us in that barcode from the DVLA. We take your photograph, your fingerprints, your electronic signature. All of that is captured electronically, sent down the line digitally to the DVLA, and it's kept there in the DVLA under your details. No paperwork anywhere at all. And in terms of anti-fraud, identity verification, etc., it's almost, I like to use the word which would be stupid, but it's almost perfect. I'm sure somebody will find a way around some of it, but at the moment it is leading edge in this area. And I think that's really where the post office plays, is where you need to work digitally, you have to have a digital identity proven first of all. And that's the first stage in any of this work in terms of digital by default. The second main area where we play then is, as both Wilma and David referred to, there will be many customers who can't or don't want to or who choose not to interact with you digitally. And then what the post office provides is that comfort of a local place they can go to where we can either assist that digital application for them or do it for them. So you can have, if your policy is digital by default, you can make it universal if you have an exceptions channel where you've got people who are trained to be able to deliver that service for people who can't or won't do it themselves. So that, in a sense, is the traditional post office in the community, now digitally enabled for the 21st century, and thirdly, already doing it, which is why we were so keen to be part of the conference the last 2 or 3 days.
Thank you very much. And a solution that might actually even keep the Daily Mail happy. That'd be quite a surprise. Okay, and can I now pass on to Joan?
Good morning. I'm Joan Wood, Director of Online and Digital for HMRC. In my opening remarks, I just want to touch on 3 areas and then we can deal with questions afterwards. Firstly, our online services and what they're about, some of the things that we've done working with other people, and about the changing landscape. Just a little tiny bit of context for you. HMRC is a huge business and it's about money. Dulux is about paint, HMRC is about money. We collect about £1 billion a day in revenue and we pay out 98 million in credits and benefits. And we deal and touch just about every citizen and business in the UK. And a lot of the way in which we touch them is not optional. They don't have a choice about whether they transact and pay taxes, and that actually affects the behaviours and it affects the way we deal with them. Some of it's underpinned by regulation. But how you actually transact business with customers is crucial. You can make it hard or you can make it easy. And with digital and online, we're trying to make it as easy as possible. We currently have round about 250 plus online services, and volume-wise, we take about 70 million online tax returns, submissions, duties, transactions per year. So it's definitely a very big business. Some of them you will have heard about, like self-assessment tax returns online. About 3/4 of tax returns are now all sent online. And 31st of January, we're the 3rd busiest website in the world, next to Facebook and Google. And on that particular day alone, we take 572,000 tax returns online, a very peaky business where that's concerned. We have a big website. Around about 5 million people a month come to our website for guidance and forms and advice. And in addition to acting on behalf of HMRC, we also run BusinessLink. Now, BusinessLink is the business-facing equivalent of DirectGov, and we run that for all government departments and agencies who use that. Just a couple of things I'll mention about our online services, because obviously we've got a lot of them, and some of these things you may think are obvious, but we've kind of learnt it over the years. Some things like building in feedback mechanisms. You know, don't wait until you've built it and then go out and ask. Most of our online services already have automatic facility to lead feedback that are in there. Building them around the customers, making them interactive and making them accessible. We've just done some work quite recently with Adobe around accessible forms. Apparently it is groundbreaking and world leading in making the forms accessible for people who are disabled. We've actually ended up with forms that are extremely usable by everybody. So those types of factors are worth taking into account. Other things that we've done, we've used mandation. And we've used incentives, both cash incentives and preferential treatment of channel. And that's something that can be used and should be used, but you need to use it wisely. Because if you do mandate, you must have assisted digital options for people who will always need help. Those assisted digital options may be the use of an intermediary, they may be the use of another channel, but they must be there and they must be signposted for people. For HMRC and our online services, it's pretty much all embracing. I talked about us being about money. Most of the money comes in digitally. Most of the money comes in electronically. You know, it's not paper-based. We don't have much cash transaction going on with HMRC. And our customers can file data, they can view data. Accountants, for example, can view 7 years of taxpayer data online. And we're very much around transparency of service. Some things about working with others. You know, I talked about the 70 million transactions that we get online a year. Now, most of that, over 70% of those, come from commercial software products. They're not the Inland Revenue, the HMRC product. It's third parties. Now, how we've done that is we release our technical specifications, called APIs, and business rules to commercial organisations. And that can be anybody. We have some developers who are literally one man and his brother working above a garage, to bigger organisations like Sage and Pegasus and Moneysoft. And the benefit of that is that the product that they're building is something that the customer wants to use anyway. It's the product that they're using for their accounting. It's the product that they're using to pay their wages. It's almost a byproduct that in using that, they happen to submit the tax returns and things that we need from them. So a very different approach. You know, we don't have to be the product provider. Our own IT estate is run by a big system integrator, but even the big system integrator, we have over 300 software organisations and partners that we use below that who are actually helping support us. And we work very much with intermediaries and the voluntary sector, particularly around assisted digital and those types of areas. Final point is about the changing landscape. I'm a bit of a heritage model when it comes to online services, because I was actually involved when we put the very first tax return online. And if you told me back then, which would be the late 90s, early 2000s, that I would have in my handbag a little tiny device that did phone calls, emails, has thousands of photographs, thousands of pieces of music on it, satellite navigation, And it also has some fairly useful applications, such as TubeMap, and some fairly perfectly pointless applications, such as Zombies v Plants and Angry Birds, which my son put on there. I don't think I could have even imagined that that would happen. And yet that has happened during my time in digital. So the landscape is going to keep changing, and we're not going to be able to forecast, plan for, and assess everything. So you do have to sometimes just try some things and work it out as it goes. Some of the things we're having to deal with now, I have a team up in Yorkshire, that's the accent, it is Yorkshire, not Lancashire. And, you know, they deal with 50,000 phishing attacks every month. Now, phishing with a PH, not phishing with a rod and a line. That's people, you know, sending hoax emails to our citizens and our businesses, pretending to be HMRC, trying to collect bank account details and raiding bank accounts. You know, that type of thing, that's happening. It's not our business, but we have an obligation to respond to help look after our customers with that. The other area we're getting very much into now, early days for us, is social listening. I talked about my iPhone, and I have my professional network LinkedIn on there, and there are social networks as well. And listening to social listening, who's saying what about our services, who's saying what about our organisation on Twitter and other things, is as equally important for us to know that as what we get from our traditional customer insight that we get from contact centres, from research, from correspondence, and what customers tell us every day. So that's another area that we're getting into. Just to pick up on the themes that we've already discussed, as HMRC, our business strategy is a customer-centric business strategy. And what I mean by that is we've been doing work since 2006 and also taking into account our history. And we've actually segmented our customers. And, you know, there are a lot of customers. And instead of segmenting how you might have thought we'd segment by type of tax or by some other criteria, we actually segment our customers by how they are and how they behave. And by that, what I mean is we have 7 customer segments. And at this end, we have the willing and able, and that's where most citizens and business are. And then we go through willing and able who sometimes need help. We have people who always need help. We have potential rule breakers. We have rule breakers. And at the far end, we have organised crime. They are not customers, they are criminals. And with organised crime, we handle those completely differently to the way we handle our other customer segments. So that's where we are in HMRC, putting customer understanding, customer segmentation at the heart of service development and moving to a digital environment. I think one day we will have a world, and it's not that far away, where everything from policy to actual service delivery is digital by default. It's actually designed that way, it's thought that way, and it's delivered that way. And I'm looking forward to being part of that evolution and revolution, because I think it's coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone for your opening remarks. I'm going to, in a minute, open it up to the floor for questions. So whilst you're thinking about what you're going to ask this good panel of experts we got here today, I'm going to put a question to them. You know, fairly inspirational, some of that talk about where we're going, where we're headed. Good vision, I think. Why has it taken us so long? I think there's a target in 2005 where we set to be here already, what we're talking about. What's stopping us? Can I start at the end? The internet was built without an identity layer. You know, it was a fantastic invention that enables people to communicate across the globe at any time of the day. And it was deliberately built without any encumbrances of you know, complex security, because otherwise it wouldn't have been a success. It wouldn't have caught fire like it did. But you know, it's a very radical change in thinking, and you know, it's taken the world. It's not just the UK. It's taken the world a long time to understand that if you're going to change the behaviour of people and get them to use digital channels, which is a great advantage to many people. Once they've done it, they see how convenient it is. But if you're going to encourage them in that direction, you've got to have a different mindset. And it's taken a long time for people to learn that mindset. It's not as if
You know, many large private sector organisations are expert at it. They're continually learning what to do. So it's you know, but the advantage, as I say, about a private sector organisation is that nobody has to use it. If they don't get it right, you know, if the bank doesn't work, then you go to another bank. You don't have you know, a right to be in the citizen's life. So they have to first of all establish how they're going to get people to use you know, the digital version of their services. It's not surprising it's taken a while for you know, the public services to think through these complicated issues, because there's you know, it's a totally different proposition.
Wilma, do you have?
Yes, I would say that in addition to that, there's also the fact that customers in the first place are not always aware of the availability of online solutions to complete certain transactions or services they're interested in. The very first thing that they remember is the way they did it the last time, and by inertia they tend to follow what they remember what they did the last time. So in our case, we know that about 80% of our customers go to the post office when they think about applying for a passport. And we know that that's driven by past behavior. So currently our online penetration is still fairly low. But when it comes to actually looking into changing that behavior, we think that, of course, it's going to be about raising awareness, and also about ensuring that we, at specific touch points, we can start sharing what other choices are there available for them, including online, and therefore they can then keep it in mind and make that decision. So I think it's a question of past behavior in addition to that.
And I'd say I think we already are doing it, to be slightly controversial. Not across everything, and we've not got everything online, but you know, let's not do ourselves down here. We are actually doing a lot of business online, whether it be advice and guidance, whether it be transaction. If we talk about the pay-as-you-earn system, which most of you here will be in because you're pay-as-you-earn employees, you know, over 99% of those returns relating to your pay come in online. And you know, that data doesn't get touched by an operator. It goes straight through. It's cleaner, it's validated, it's checked, it's assured. It's a much better response. And in terms of employers and companies who use that, compared to when we used to have to do things manually, they now get things, you know, instantly. Better, quicker, faster repayments. When I talked about forms, we have about, I don't know, 5,000 forms on our website. We're now changing those to interactive forms, iForms. You can go to the stand downstairs and see them. And you may think, well, what difference does that make? But the fact is that if you use one of the interactive forms, it's got validation built in, and it auto-checks and corrects, and you can't make mistakes. You know, we started our journey with an online tax return because a minister thought that that would be an appropriate form for us to start with. Now, you know, I was there. 900 cross-referencing data fields is not where you would normally start doing an online software application. But if you compare the user experience of doing your tax return online, where you just see the bits that you need, and it jumps to the bits that you don't need, compared to a form landing on your desk that's got potentially 900 boxes. You know, people are shifting. And as they shift for one service, as said, some of our services are mandatory, people have had to use them. Once they've shifted online, it's a bit like all of us in this room. Once you've tried it, it's the many monkeys. Everybody starts following it. So I think, you know, the nation is changing all around us. It's not just the younger generation. There are silver surfers. Everybody's at it. So, you know, I think we've got to recognise that it has taken us a while, but IT is quite a new industry. IT in itself is not that old. And I would say that you can expect now the pace to be probably significantly faster than it's been thus far.
Thank you.
So I agree with Joan. I think there's an awful lot going on currently. I don't think we're anywhere near fast enough, and I think we have to be a lot more self-critical as people working within the space. And one of the things that I've certainly found is that we're not joined up enough, and I include Post Office in that. So in trying to move into this digital world and accelerate what we're doing, Government, you know, you hear people say people work in silos. You cannot do that, because this is about changing people's habits. It's about making things convenient for them to use, and they will only use it when it is. And so if they have to go into different government departments several times, they just won't do it. And I think that, you know, the passport and post office example is a really good one. Wilma's right, 80% of people immediately think about the post office. So what's the solution to moving that online? And do I care if that takes business away from the branches? No, because actually what we should have in terms of the post office website is an icon that says click here and takes you straight through to your online passport application. Because actually if you do that online and then you still have to come into the post office for your visual identity to be authenticated, it's about working together. And I don't think, you know, as government, national, local, however you want to describe us, public servants, we've done enough of that thinking and working together. And certainly I can see from the work we're doing with the Cabinet Office now, that is really changing. But it's hard work, because actually it means that, you know, from our point of view, we have to go across numbers of departments to try and get this working. And I know Cabinet Office are doing the same. But I think Joan is right. You know, we're in a much, much better place than we've been for a long time. But goodness, is there a long way to go and a big opportunity.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to put it out to the floor and ask, are there any questions? We have some microphone people, so they can come and bring you a mic and we can hear you. There must be a question from the floor to challenge these guys. Thank you. Just wait for your mic, if you don't mind. Thank you. And let us know where you're from and who you are.
Hi, my name is Felicity. I work with Job Centre Plus. A recent example of where digitalisation can and can't work can be our census. We know that there was the option to do it online, but we also had the piece of paper that came through our doors that was sometimes easier to fill in because it was right in front of me. I know I did mine on paper, unfortunately. We know that certain companies have succeeded in digitalisation by removing all options, and I use EasyJet for an example, which became the success that it is when it removed all other options. If we put the right support network in place, is it a viable option for us to remove all other options to force digitalisation?
Fantastic question. Who would like to start? Yeah. Joan?
Well, we have done that in some areas, and there are some things that we're working on at the moment. We're working on a project called OneClick, which is the startup registration process for business. So instead of having different, you talk about joining up, instead of having, you know, different places to register as a business. And the intention is to make that the digital by default, so that when businesses start, and I think if you think of small business, around 700,000 small businesses start every year, and around 600,000 cease every year. So, you know, there's a lot of transactions there. And in terms of degrading or declining other channels, yes, but you have to do it very carefully and manage it, because, you know, the assisted digital part of it cannot be overlooked. You must be able to deal with people who cannot use digital channels, either through an intermediary or directly, or indeed have conscientious objections, such as Metric Martyrs and the Plymouth Brethren and people like that who will not use digital channels. But in answer to your question, yes, we've already used mandation. Use it wisely, use it carefully. And in terms of channel shift, to actually make the online channel the channel that you would prefer to use, because it's better, it's easier, it's quicker, faster response, nicer customer experience. That's where we want to get to. That's what we're...
David.
I support that in terms of, you know, often we hear about, you know, this is going to be mandated, but, you know, that's not quite the right mentality for this problem. This is about working around the customer and helping the customer to use the convenience of digital channels. And, you know, I'm sure everybody here uses digital in some way, shape or form, as described earlier. And, you know, there's huge opportunity that we still can extract from digital as a means of adding convenience. So the need to sort of move directly to mandation, I mean, there are very good reasons why HMRC have done it in various contexts, but there is so much opportunity for rethinking how we deliver public services before we need to get near the mandation button. I think, you know, I don't think we have to think in that sort of term at the moment.
Paul?
I think you can mandate it, provided you allow for an exception channel where that digital capture can be done if an individual customer can't do it themselves. So the DVLA process is entirely digital, that there is no paper channel, but there is an opportunity to come into a post office if you don't want to do it or can't do it yourself to be assisted in that process. And it's part of, I'm sure some people here must have been at ND11, the National Digital Conference, which Martha Lane Fox was one of the lead sort of thought leaders behind it. And she will tell you there are 6 million people in the UK still who can't or won't do digital, they're digitally excluded in some way or another. Now that number will come down and you can mandate digitally, but what Martha and her team will tell you is that you have to allow for other channels to be there to help them go through that process if your process is digital. So I think the answer is you can, provided you provide help, because whatever we do has to be universal. You can't just do something for one narrow group of customers.
Wilma?
Well, I would say from our perspective, yes, I think it depends on in which business, which department you're in. I can see for HMRC, for some transactions, how that could be successful. From our perspective, it's still about identifying the ideal channel mix. We, of course, we're not in that position yet to think about mandation, but if we're in that position about providing digital by default, more strictly, we would always, of course, think about other channels and solutions, which, you know, we would perhaps encourage online more, but we definitely make sure that people still use other services, because we know that they could have, for us, it's about channel, it's about context. So if you are in a position where online is your best solution, then go ahead and use it. But if you, for example, are in a situation where you're very busy in your life, you need to apply for a passport, and you just happen to pass by the post office, and that's convenient for you, then of course go ahead and use the post office service. It's about ensuring that we provide choice. We might encourage online, but we're not in a position to think about mandation at this stage. Perhaps using tools such as nudging and others about ensuring that we can influence that behavior, but still providing choice to customers.
Thank you very much. There's a question just up at the back by you, Lindsay. Yeah, this man in front.
Thanks. I'm Michael Dunkley from Ministry of Justice. However good the customer experience will be, the customers will be reticent if they don't think their data is held securely, and if they think their data might be sold on or misused in some way. How are you tackling that part of the equation as well?
Okay, who would like to start? Yeah, Joan?
In terms of security of data, I mean, you know, it's a broad issue, as you understand, with Ministry of Justice, just the same with HMRC. But as far as the online services are concerned, in transacting, we treat it as a business transaction, so there are terms and conditions. You know, we guarantee that once the data's with us, it is secure. We have mechanisms that, without going into huge amounts of detail, that show that when data has been changed, that we know that the data's been changed and who's changed it, and why it's been changed, and where that's stored. We use franking exercises like barcodes and something called magic numbers and canonicalization. It took me a very long time to learn to say that word, so I do feel that I wanted to use it. So, you know, the thing about data is everything that you've ever known about data applies just as much and more so in the online channel to what it did in paper. And within HMRC, we actually find that in some circumstances we are more controlled and more in charge of our data when it's transacted online than what we were in the paper world. But yes, absolutely, it's an issue of trust. And as I've said, with our take-up figures over 90% pay-as-you-earn, 73.25% self-assessment, the numbers speak for themselves. People are trusting our government services and they are transacting online and they are dealing with us in that way.
Wilma, would you like to follow on from that?
Well, I would say from the Identity and Passport Service, we're in a position where we would somewhat are depending on other developments in government, such as the Identity Assurance Program, to actually release some very secure tools to rely on an online service only. At the moment, we can't offer a full online service. We're still, part of our process is still offline. So as I said, we have to, people have to send us a declaration form with a wet signature offline, and then there's on the back end, there's examiners and other and specific security processes to make sure that, you know, the person applying for a passport is the right person. So we're still not in that position to really ensure that you know, we can do everything online, but also it depends on, as we've all said before, it's also about working together, and we are doing quite a bit of work with the Identity Assurance Program already to understand the implications of those developments, and then thinking about the future in terms of how we can actually improve our service, that, you know, to make it online fully.
Thank you. Dave.
So on the subject of resale of data in the first instance, so the proposition that we're developing, you know, collectively across government and from Cabinet Office has privacy absolutely at the heart of it, because without privacy and without assurances around privacy, then we will never establish the trust of the customer. So we've at the moment, if you go onto Facebook, for example, in contrast, if you go onto Facebook, if you use Facebook, you are the product that Facebook is selling. You're not the customer of Facebook, you're the product, because you're loading your data onto Facebook, and Facebook is then selling that data off to other parties, and that's how they make their money. And that's not a sustainable model, I think, personally, and it's certainly not one that you know, we would support for the identity assurance program. In quite the opposite, we want the customer to be in control, and the customer to have transparency of where their data is and how it's being used. And you know, if we go further forward, we've got enough complex tasks to address in the short term, but eventually we need to have the rights of the customer assured. So, for example, at the moment, when I go onto Google and I scroll to the bottom of all that small print, which we're all liars, we all say we've read the terms and conditions, and I'm sure there's nobody, if there's anybody here who's read the terms and conditions, then please let me know afterwards. But we all click the button that says I accept, I've read them, but nobody has. And what those rules say are you're on your own. If this all goes wrong and we lose your data or some, you know, terrible events happen, it's up to you, customer. You know, we Google provide tools, and you're able to use those tools, but it's buyer beware. Now that doesn't actually help for most people, because most people want to have confidence that when it goes wrong, that they know what they can do about it and they know what their rights are. And so we want to develop that proposition that the customer should be able to turn to a party to help them when things go wrong in this digital world. And so that's a key piece of it. A key piece of solving the problem is solving the resolution of difficult situations. So in terms of reselling of data, you know, if the customer wants to sell their data, if they get convenience effectively, if they get lower costs from doing that, you know, it's the customer should be able to do that, but with their eyes open. The default position should always be, you know, that the customer's privacy is protected. In terms of the security aspects of this, I mean, security is always going to be a problem. You know, nobody ever is going to solve security. You know, that will be a perennial problem. But one of the interesting things about identity assurance is how it can help address the security, in the context that if I can prove to you who I am, or if I can prove to you my authority or my entitlement to be in a transaction with you, you don't actually need to know my name. You don't actually need to know quite a lot of information about me. If you can assume that I am, you know, for example, if I wanted to vote at an election, if I can prove that I'm a UK citizen and that I'm over 18 and that I've only registered once to vote, it's not actually necessary for me to pass around my identity information or any other information. So you can actually, with the model that we're developing, you can actually minimize the amount of data that's being passed around so that you don't end up with the security vulnerabilities that we have when we pool lots of data together, and then you have a point of weakness. There's probably a longer answer than required to that question, but those are the approaches that we're taking.
Thank you. Paula.
I think very briefly then just a couple of points in terms of where we're already engaged in this area. So the equipment that we now have, this AEI equipment for capturing identity and assuring it, there is a tender out at the moment which we're responding to for a much wider service with the UK Borders Authority. And as well as the integrity of the equipment we already have, which shows who you are, captures your picture, sees you sign, so the signature is clearly the person in front of you. They're also asking for CCTV cameras in to monitor, that whole process, both in terms of the customer and the counter-colleague that's doing the transaction. So the most important thing in this whole process as you move into it is that initial capture to make sure that you have the data integrity around the security going into the system so that government clients can trust it and individuals know that that data is secure because it's been sent securely. And then in terms of the data protection, I guess just a reassurance in terms of, having told you we're involved in this space, we don't trade any of that data at all. We don't hold any of it. If we capture data for you as a government department, we shoot it down the line to you. It isn't held anywhere other than where you securely have guaranteed to your customers it will be held. And I think, those are very important points, and it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question at the front here from this lady.
We've heard quite a lot about how you delivered quite different and radical processes. What I'm just wondering is, what would be your top tip about how you led your organisations and kept them enthused about delivering, particularly in the controlled and reducing environments that we're currently in?
I think, Joan, that is a good one for you.
Yeah, in terms of how do you get the department enthusiastic about putting services online, it sounds sort of obvious, but often it's not. It's to actually show people some things. So to build little clever wireframes and show the art of the possible. Everybody starts off quite often with a belief that they're so different and it can't be done, and there are so many exceptions and the policy is so difficult you can't write the rule for it. But once you actually start showing people the difference in user experience, people do get quite enthusiastic. We talked earlier about the changes in society, and I have to say the way in which people now outside work use online services, use websites, book hotels online, use Facebook, has hugely changed their expectation. So therefore, from grannies to toddlers, people are transacting online. So there's almost like an expectation now that you can get a bit of enthusiasm going. You'll still get traditionalists who are reluctant and believe that, until every single possible variable has been accounted for, it can't be done. But what I would say with online is, just try and keep going and revise it and make it better. I mean, the self-assessment return service is substantially better now than what it was in year one, but you just have to keep going and learn as you go and make it better, because the good thing about online, of course, is it is quite quick to change things, so you can be quite iterative.
Paula, it's probably a process you're going through as well, I should know.
Yes, and I genuinely don't mean this as a kind of sell, but if you haven't gone down to the post office stand, do have a look, because as Joan said, it's only when you see this that actually you can get people really excited about it. And it's either seeing, in our case, the equipment and the training behind it to make it work, but also things like interactive forms and intelligent forms. As soon as somebody's seen, I've mentioned this example before. My mother had to apply for a blue badge, and I forget how many pages, and if you're responsible for blue badge here, I apologise, but let's say it's between 12 and 16 pages. It's a lot for an old lady to fill in. Had that form been done interactively and the right questions asked up front, it could have been cut down to 4 pages. And that's the beauty of it. But I think you do actually have to go and see and try and feel it. And I defy anybody, other than those that have some sort of conscientious objection to it, to not buy into the process eventually. But it is about people, it's change management, and you only manage change by helping people through that process and educating and involving them.
Thank you. David?
I would just say generally that digital is a very empowering medium for both customer and for service provider. In the past, when you built a factory to do something, you had a huge hierarchy of people, from the guy at the top who designed it all the way down to the person at the bottom who was going to operate it, and many years to produce it, and any change to that process was had to be approved all the way through the ranks. And digital is a great leveler, because you can do things, as you were saying, much more quickly, much more nimbly, in a much more agile manner, and that means everybody in the organisation who's delivering it has to be adding much more value to the whole process, in that the ability for idea generation to come out from small teams and be tried out. There's a much greater opportunity to try it out, see if it works, and then learn from that. And it's a very rewarding environment to work in that sort of context, and getting direct feedback effectively from customers, because you can measure very quickly what works, what doesn't work. And then you can start to focus on helping the customers in areas where you get it hopefully closely to right the first time, but you're always going to learn what's not working, and then help to focus on improving those pieces. So I think it's a very empowering, exciting medium to be in.
Thank you. And Wilma?
Well, I would say I speak from a position where I don't lead the digital service. Actually, I provide the customer intelligence so that the people who lead the development of the service are realistic about their expectations based on a real understanding of customer behavior. So I suppose my answer would be about not so much about how you make people enthusiastic, but how you make people be realistic about the situation in terms of online usage. So we provide as much insight as we have around behavior and needs, and we ensure that people understand why people make decisions, why people choose different channels, and that we have realistic targets for online and realistic forecasts for the future, so that we don't expect that just by launching a solution everybody's going to go at it immediately, and that we have a realistic approach for the future. So I guess it's a bit of how you manage expectations.
Okay, well, we're coming to an end of this session, but just before we do, I'm going to ask the panel to be very, very quick with this, because we really are struggling for time. But what's the one thing that you would say that's going to really drive this agenda forward? Paula, I'm going to start with you.
I think working together, no doubt about that at all.
Thank you.
I think working together and moving at pace.
I think it's about understanding customer behavior and ensuring that you share that understanding throughout the organization.
I'll be dull and echo these points, but it's collaboration and getting the incentives right for everybody to collaborate. Often we sort of think about them and us in some way, whoever the them and us might be, but it's about making sure that the incentives models work so that we do all collaborate together, because and collaborate around the needs of the customer.
Thank you very much. I wonder if you can join me in giving them a warm round of applause. Enjoy the rest of Civil Service Live and carry on picking their brains at the post office stand, I should imagine.